How were the pyramids really built? Who built them? How did people do it? There's so many theories. Some refer to alien intervention. Others speak of lost technology and levitation. So what's the truth? Let's try to find it out. This is Infinity, and in this episode you'll learn the most interesting theories about how exactly the pyramids were built in Egypt. The pyramids could be built with the help of sound. Today there are lots of various theories as to how the pyramids could have been built. However, the most interesting, and at least the most unusual version, in my opinion, is the theory about sound.
Instead of falling down, can actually fall up.
Some people believe that it was thanks to sonic gravity that the Egyptians were able to create such amazing structures. This method first hit the masses in the early 1930s when a Swiss engineer saw with his own eyes how Tibetan monks used drums, singing, and musical instruments to lift huge stone blocks to a height of almost 1,640 feet in an attempt to build a new temple. Not surprisingly, this was immediately associated with Egypt and its stunning pyramids. Many people may now think that all of this is nothing more than fiction. How can sound help objects to levitate? But unfortunately, or fortunately, although this version is not proven, it may well be real. The fact is that nowadays there's already some evidence that it's theoretically possible. In two recent experiments, the results of which have been published in scientific magazines, the researchers managed to lift polystyrene balls into the air, which size was greater than the wavelength used to lift them. It's a serious step in the direction of controlled levitation. In addition, almost every new experiment in this area opens up a completely different method of levitation. For example, a British scientific group broke the record for the size of a levitating object using 3 parallel sound transducers generating waves of different frequencies. But what could this have to do with Egypt? Did the ancient people also conduct numerous experiments? It's probable that they did. An Arab historian, while writing his works on this mysterious country, suggested that a magical papyrus with symbols was placed under each stone, after which a metal rod struck the stone, initiating the process of levitation. This very stone, according to the historian, had to move exclusively along a path designated for it with metal poles on either side. This approach ensured possible levitation all along the way and allowed even incredibly heavy objects to be moved. In fact, if you start to go deeper into this subject, you can find other similarities or related facts that only confirm the idea that the Egyptians were in a good relationship with sound. For example, in the Great Pyramid of Giza, the sound produced at certain frequencies could be dramatically amplified. Another object for imitation can be considered Coral Castle in Florida. Although it was built relatively recently, it still raises many questions. The thing is that the castle was built very quickly, and the architect, Edward Leeds Scalnan, did not allow anyone at the construction site, kept everything in strict secrecy. But how did the man manage to drag such heavy objects all by himself? That remains a mystery. Here you'll find that Leeds Scalnan's construction has nothing to do with the pyramids, but it seems so only at first glance. If you delve into Edward's history, you'll notice that the man was very much into radio and sound experiments. His house was constantly full of sound equipment, the possible use of which is even difficult to imagine. In an interview, he also added fuel to the fire of discussion with the following sentence: "I have discovered the secrets of the pyramids and how the Egyptians and ancient builders used only primitive tools to lift and place stone blocks weighing many tons." Definitely, he was talking about a specific technology, and it's likely that it could be the technology of sonic levitation. Even assuming the fact that people may have used sound for their building purposes, it's very rare to find any trace of this process or some clues. Nevertheless, if the pyramids were built and we can see them today, something must have existed. So let's think what exactly could have been used in the past. Let us not go far and take one of the most popular works of Herodotus. The ancient Greek historian claimed that the Egyptians could have used some kind of machines to maneuver supermassive stones. However, moving rocks is one thing, but how could such even, beautiful and smooth stones have existed at all? Stones had definitely been cut somehow, but to do it with one's own hands was an impossible task. Apparently, there was a whole shop, or at least a number of tools, thanks to which the Egyptians received the stone ready for work with. Speaking of tools, it seems to me that ancient people could easily surpass us in terms of development. This is evidenced by pure ruthenium and chromium found not so long ago. They were found just at one of the pyramids. The fact is that pure ruthenium is very inert under normal conditions and can be preserved unchanged for centuries. but the technology for separating it is not so permanent. The process can easily fail. But how did ancient people manage to separate it? Or maybe it's just some kind of hoax. After all, even today, pure ruthenium has very specific uses. For example, it's used in aerospace engineering. Why did the ancient Egyptians need it? As for chromium, the situation is somewhat similar. It's impossible to find it in its pure form in nature. There's a chance that it was also created by ancient people. Only here there are much more factors against it. Metallic chromium in natural conditions is short-lived, so the most likely way of getting it into ancient samples is modern contamination. Nevertheless, this is not the final version and scientists could be wrong. If all of this is true, then it turns out that ancient people had some sophisticated technology for cutting metals, as well as their subsequent processing in order to send them to production. And if we take into account what perfect pyramids they built and how cool they possessed stones, these very technologies were at the top of progress and several steps ahead of those that we have today. If you think that all of this is nothing more than mere coincidence, just remember that the statues of the Egyptians have perfect symmetry. The left side of the face corresponds 100% to the right. To make such a thing with your own hands without any technology is unreal. In addition, scientists have often explored the underground tunnels of serapeums. What is this if not the best example of precision engineering? Elon Musk's point of view. Of course, the topic of alien life, some kind of super technology, and fantasy in general could not help but be talked about by Elon Musk, the man who's been in the world's spotlight lately. Several laboratories that study atmospheric phenomena have made a statement that the Egyptian pyramids have a strange effect on space. The anomaly that's arisen recently even resembles the aurora borealis in some way. Scientists, of course, do not agree with conspiracy theories and say that this is nothing more than the result of high temperatures. But it's always hot in Egypt, isn't it? Why then has no one noticed anything like this before? Of course, this story couldn't help but involve Elon Musk, the one directly connected with space. The billionaire didn't mince words or beat around the bush. He said clearly and directly that, in his opinion, you and I are not the only living beings in the universe. Musk is sure that the pyramids were built by some other civilization. And it's not about use of sound gravitation and not about super technology of the past, which unexpectedly have all sunk into oblivion. The pyramids were built by aliens, who, relying on their centuries-old experience, easily erected these structures as a gift to the ancient people of Egypt. Such words of the entrepreneur did not leave a single person from the Egyptian authorities indifferent, which made them immediately respond to Elon on Twitter. The country's authorities invited him to visit their homeland and listen to all the most important arguments for the fact that the founders of this culture were none other than the ancient Egyptians. What do you think? Does Elon Musk's version have a right to exist? Or did he just make such a statement for the sake of hype around his personality? Write in the comments. Well, while you share your opinion in the comments, I'll begin to tell you about the more realistic methods of construction that ancient people used to build the pyramids. Let's assume it wasn't aliens, or even a method of sonic levitation. In that case, the Egyptians had to lift and drag all the blocks themselves. Hypotheses on this subject, by the way, are also plentiful. One of them is a version about moving blocks on boats. In 2013, scientists found several documents describing the schedule of 40 workers who were led by a certain Merer. The team used a sailing wooden boat and moved several dozen blocks in one trip through the system of channels from the Nile almost to the pyramid. By simple calculations, it's possible to draw a conclusion that for one season, one team could transport approximately 1,000 blocks. Numerous researchers of the area have also proved the fact that in those times, with a high degree of probability, there was a higher water level. The second version is the dragging of blocks. One of the most difficult tasks of the builders was to move the heavy stones. There's a fresco showing 172 people pulling an alabaster statue on a sled. The path the workers followed is watered, which facilitates transportation by creating a slight sliding effect. This is not the end of the versions of how the blocks could have been dragged. Many scientists believe the main use of the cradle mechanism, which is periodically found during excavations. Its essence was clear and understandable. By placing 4 such devices around a block, workers easily rolled the object. Moreover, one of the companies tried to conduct an experiment where they tried to move a block weighing 2.5 tons in exactly the same way. One more version of the dragging of blocks is the theory of ramps. By the way, Diodorus Siculus adhered to it in the 1st century BC. He believed that the Egyptians had a certain system of the central ramp, on the sides of which there were 2 staircases with numerous openings for the pillars. Using sledges attached with ropes to wooden poles on which a stone block was placed, the ancient Egyptians were able to pull alabaster blocks out of the quarry on very steep slopes of 20 degrees or more. As for the extraction of other, smaller stones, the people there were no different from us. Judging by the found artifacts, the Egyptians used simple stone hammers, bronze picks, and chisels. That's all, guys. What theory of the pyramid's construction do you adhere to? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and see you later.